Hello guys, I'm Yadagireddy and welcome to the series of Java for Absolute Beginners. In this video, we will discuss about arrays in Java. In my earlier videos, we have already discussed about variables and data types in Java, right? So using those two concepts, you can create the variables and you can store the values also into those variables, right? So it is something like this. So here I have created two variables and I have stored the values also into these variables, right? This employee ID is a variable which is of type integer and we are storing 101 value into this employee ID. And in the similar way, this employee name is a variable which is of type string and we are storing this Yadagiri text into this employee name, right? So this is how we basically create the variables and we store the values, right? But here we are actually storing only a single value, okay? This 101 or this Yadagiri text, it is a single value, right? So we are storing a single value into these variables. But in the real world applications, we may have a requirement to store more than one value. Okay, for example, if you take an organization, in the organization you will not have only a single employee, right? You will have more than one employee. So you want to store all the employee IDs of those employees, or you want to store all the employee names of those employees. So in that case, what you will do, for example, if you have 100 employees, you will not create 100 variables here, right? Employee ID 1, employee ID 2, employee ID 3, like that you will not create, right? So you need some kind of a container where you can store all the employee IDs, or you want to store all the employee names into this container, right? So that is why Java has introduced this arrays concept actually, okay? So what this arrays will do is, it will allow you to store more than one value in a container based structure, okay? So basically an array means it is a container object that holds a fixed number of values of a single type, okay? So here why I am saying single type? So that is because here if you see, this employee ID is an integer type of variable, right? That means I can store only integer value here. So in the similar way, when you are creating an array also, you need to mention the data type. That means what this array can actually store, that you need to specify. Okay. So if you specify it as an integer type, then it can store only the integer variables. Okay. Integer type of values basically. If you specify it as a string type, then you can store all the text variables only. I mean text values only. Okay. So that is why I am saying a single type. Okay. So here we have two types of arrays in Java basically. So those are single dimensional array and multi-dimensional array. So let's see what is the single dimensional array and multi-dimensional array individually. Okay. So first we will see the single dimensional array. So the single dimensional array means, for example, in our real world, we will have two dimensions, right? Horizontal and vertical dimension. So in the single dimensional array, you will have only one dimension basically. Okay. That means you will have only horizontal dimension. So let me just take the Excel example. Okay. So you all have worked with Excel, right? So in the Excel, you will have multiple rows and multiple columns. Okay. So this every column is a vertical one and every row is a horizontal one, right? So in the single dimensional array, you will have only horizontal array. That means only one row. You will not have more than one row. Okay. Only one row with multiple columns. So for example, like this, if you have 5 values, you will create something like this. So like this, you will have the single dimensional array. Single dimensional array means only one row and multiple columns, that you need to remember. Okay. So basically in the array, if you want to access the value or if you want to assign the value, you need to use the index. Okay. So arrays are actually working based on the indexing. Okay. So here this index is starting from 0. So here the first value will have 0 index and second value will have 1 index, like that it will go. Okay. So for example, if I create an array with size 5, then I will have maximum index of 4 only. Why? Because the first index is starting from 0, right? So that is why I will have only 4 index. So here you can see we have only 4, right, index, and but we have 5 values here. So this is the concept of single dimensional array. So now let's create the single dimensional arrays. So let me just remove this. So here first I will show you how to define the array. Then I will show you how to initialize the array. Okay. So first I need to create one variable. So basically I am creating the array and I am assigning one variable name here. Okay. So int square braces and close square braces, and my variable name is ARR, for example. So this is how we basically define the array. So here I am putting the square brackets, right? So this square brackets will tell you this ARR variable is an array. Okay. So after the data type, I am giving the square brackets. So this will tell the compiler that this ARR variable is an array type of variable. Okay. So you can put the square brackets here after the data type, or you can put it here after the variable also. So now the definition is completed, right? Now let's see the initialization part. So here, if you want to initialize the array, you need to specify the size of the array. So the arrays are actually fixed in length. That means when you are initializing the array, you will provide some size and the size cannot be increased or decreased. So here I want to initialize the array, right? So I will write here new So just like creation of object, we need to initialize the array. Okay. So int and open the square brackets and close the square brackets. Here we need to specify the size. For example, I want to create one array with length of 5. Okay. With size of 5, I want to create the array. So I need to pass 5 here. So now the initialization part is completed. But we haven't assigned any values to this one. So now let's assign some values here. So if you want to assign or if you want to retrieve the values, we have to use the index, right? So you need to access something like this. ARR is the variable, right? So you need to open the square brackets and close the square brackets, and you need to specify the index here. Okay. ARR of 0 means first element in the array equaled. So I want to assign some value. So this is an integer type of array, right? So let's assign 5 here. So next I want to assign the second value. Okay. Second value means index is 1. So let me assign 10. So now in this array, this size is actually 5, right? That means the maximum index is 4. So here till 4th index, I have assigned the values. Okay. So this is how you have to assign the values in the array, in the single dimensional array. So now we are only talking about the single dimensional array. So after completion of single dimension, we will go to multi-dimensional array. Okay. So here, this is how we need to assign the values. Okay. So there is another way that I will show you, but let's first see how to access the values. Okay. So if you want to access any value from the array, again you need to use the index only. Okay. So I want to access the first value, ARR of 0. So in the similar way, okay. So here we have assigned the values and we are printing the values here. So we are accessing and printing the values in the console. So let me run this program. So here in the right side console, the values are printed, right? First 5, then 10, then 15, then 25 and 60. First value is 5 and second value is 10 and third value is this one and fourth, fifth, right? So for example, here instead of 4, by mistakenly I have given 5. Basically my array size is actually only 5 and I am trying to access the 6th element. Index 5 means the 6th element, right? But my array size is actually 5. So I am accessing which is not actually available in the array. So in this case, what happens? We will get the exception, right? So what kind of exception we will get? Let's see. So let me run this. So here it is saying array index out of bound exception. Okay. That means you have only till 4 index, but you are trying to access the 5th index, which is not actually available in the array. So that is why we are getting this array index out of bounds exception. So when you get this exception, you need to make sure that you are accessing the right index. Okay. So that is one thing. And for example, here, if I don't assign any values, what happens? So let me comment this. So here I have created and initialized the array, right? But I haven't assigned any values here. So in this case, what happens? The default value of an integer is 0. So in the similar way, for the integer array also, the default sizes are 0. Okay. So let me print this. So now you see, without assigning the values, I'm getting everything as 0, right? Every element value is 0. That is because the default value of an integer is 0. So that is about this single dimensional array. So now let me show you how to assign the values at the initialization phase itself. Okay. Here I have created the memory for this array. I have initialized it. Then I have assigned the values separately, right? So let me comment this also. Okay. So I'll just copy this. So here this statement will create some memory, right? So that means you are initializing here. So let me remove that. Okay. So I can add one curly braces and close the curly braces. So within the curly braces, you can directly assign the values. Okay. So this 5, 10, 15, 65 and all, you can directly assign here by using comma. Okay. 5, 10, same set of values I am assigning here. But here I am not mentioning any size of this array. So here I have given the size, right? But here I haven't mentioned the size. That doesn't mean that this array size can be increased later. Okay. Here I am just not mentioning the size, but internally it will create with 5 size because it will count all these elements size and it will create that size. Okay. So let me just run this. Now you see we are getting the values, right? So here if I again access the 5th index, I should get the index bound of exception, right? Now you see we are getting the exception, right? Array index out of bound. That means the size of this array is only 5. Okay. Even though I haven't mentioned the size here, internally it will consider all these elements count as a size. So that you need to remember. So for example, if you know all the values before running the program itself, then you can assign the values like this. Okay, instead of initializing separately and assigning the values separately, you can provide the values here in the same line. But if you are assigning the values in the runtime, then you cannot use this one. Okay, you have to go with this one only. So that is the thing about single dimensional arrays. So let me comment this. So next we have multi-dimensional array, right? So what is a multi-dimensional array? So here the same concept of single dimensional array is applicable to multi-dimensional array also. Okay, but the only difference is in the single dimensional array you have only a single row. Okay, but in the multi-dimensional array you will have more than one row. So here in the single dimensional array we will have only a single row like this, right? But in the multi-dimensional array you will have more than one row. So that is the only difference in the single dimensional array and multi-dimensional array. Okay. So here we have two types of multi-dimensional arrays in the Java. Those are two-dimensional array and jagged array. So in the two-dimensional array, we will have fixed number of columns. Okay, in each row we will have the fixed number of columns. That means, for example, if the first row is having 4 columns, then second row also will have the 4 columns only, and third row also will have 4 columns, and fourth also will have 4 columns. So how many number of rows are there in that array? Every row will have the same set of fixed number of columns. Okay, so that is the two-dimensional array. But in the jagged array, the number of columns is different. So for example, here in the first row you can have 4 columns, and in the second row you can have only 3 columns, and in the third row again you can have 4 columns. In the in the fourth row you can have 5 columns. Okay, so that means the column size is not fixed in jagged array. Okay, in the two-dimensional array the column size is fixed across all the rows, right? But in the jagged array the column size is not fixed across the rows. So that is the only difference between two-dimensional array and jagged array. So first let's see the two-dimensional array, then we will go to jagged array. Okay. So here for creating the single dimensional array we have used one set of square brackets, right? But for creating two-dimensional array we need to use 2 sets of square brackets. Okay. So here I will create the integer type of two-dimensional array. So this is one set of square bracket and again one more set of square bracket. So I will call it as two-dimensional array. So here I need to assign the size also, right? So while assigning the size also we need to provide 2 size, that is row count and column count. The first value is row count. Okay. So I'll say 3 rows or I'll say 2 rows only. Okay, and 3 columns. Okay, 2 rows and 3 columns, that means 6 elements, 2 by 3. Okay, so here I need to assign the values, right? So while assigning the values also it is same only, but here in the single dimension array we have only one dimension, right? So that is why we have used only one index, but here we have 2 dimensions, so that is why we need to use 2 indexes. Okay, so here I need to write two-dimensional array of 0 means the first row, and of 0 means the first column. So in the first row, first column, I am assigning some value 1. Next, in the first row, I am assigning the second column value. So in the similar way, let me assign the rest of the values. Okay. So now the values are assigned, right? So let me just try to print these values in the console. Okay. So I'll use sysout. So in the similar way, just like this, we need to use, okay, so we need to use the index and print the values. So like this. So in the first row, first cell value I am printing. So in the similar way, let me add the rest of the code. So now this code is ready, right? So let me run this program. So in the console, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So everything is printed in the proper order, just like how we assigned, right? In the first row, I am trying to print the first cell value, then second cell value, then third cell value. That means first column, second column and third column value in the first row basically. Then in the second row, first column, second column and third column value. Okay. So to make it clear, let me add those values here. So we have created the array something like this. Okay. In the first row, we have assigned 3 columns, 1, 2, 3 values. Okay. In the second row, we have assigned 3 columns again, 4, 5, 6 values. Okay. So the same one we have printed here. So now it is clear, right? So now what we will do? So in this way we will assign the values. Okay. So without creating the size and assigning individually, we will assign in the single line. So for that, let me just comment this. So I will copy this one only. Equal. So here basically the same set of values and same set of configuration I am going to reproduce. Okay. So that means 2 rows and 3 columns. So here first you need to open the curly braces and close the curly braces and put the semicolon. Okay. So within this one I need to have 2 rows. So one row means like this, right? So now we got 2 rows. So in each row, we need to assign 3 columns. So here in the single dimension, if you want to create one single row, you are assigning this way, right? So the same thing, I'm going to do it here. Okay, but here it is a multi-dimensional array, right? So I need to have 2 rows and 3 columns. So in each row, 3 columns. So first I need to create the rows like this. Then in each row, I can have the columns. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So here, this is the entire array. In this array, I have 2 rows and in each row, I have 3 columns basically. So now let me run this program. Now you see the same output we are getting, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That means you can assign the values like this or you can assign the values like this also. Okay, so if you know the values before running the program itself, then you can assign the values like this. But if you don't know the values completely, then you can go with this process. Okay, if you are reading from the runtime or if you are changing something, then you can go like this. Okay, so now this one is completed, right? 2-dimensional array is completed. So let me show you the jagged array. Okay, so the concept is same. Okay, but only the thing is the column size is not fixed in the jagged array. Okay, so that is the only difference between this 2-dimensional array and jagged array. So here let me comment this entire thing. So I will write the jagged array here. Okay, I will name it as jagged array new int. So in the 2-dimensional array, we have provided the column count and row count also here, right? But in the jagged array, the column count is not fixed. So we are not going to provide the column count here, but we will provide the row count because the row count is fixed, right? So I'll say 2 rows. The same example I'm going to reproduce here. Okay, the same set of values I want to print, but with different column sizes. So here the jagged array is created, right? So I need to assign the values. The jagged array is not completely created. Only the fixed number of rows are actually created. Okay, so now in each row I need to create the column size actually. Okay, so what this will do, in the first row you are going to create the instance with 2 columns. Okay, so in the similar way you can have the second row instance also with different size. Okay, so now you can see we have created the 2 rows but with different column sizes. The first row is having 2 columns and the second row is having 4 columns. Okay, so now let me assign the values. Okay, so now the values are added. Now you can see in the first row I am adding 2 values and in the second row I am adding 4 values. So basically it looks something like this. Okay, so in the first row I have only 2 values, but in the second row I have 4 values. So this is what I am going to reproduce here. Okay, so now the values are added and let me print these values. Okay, so now the statements are ready. The printing statements are ready. Okay, so let me run this program. So now you see in the console it is printing all the values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So the concept is same while accessing and assigning the values, but while creation of the array it is little bit different. Okay, so like this, here we have provided only row count and column counts we have created separately. Okay, so let me show you in this way, directly assigning the values in the jagged array. So I'll just copy this and let me comment this entirely. So here the same concept as 2-dimensional array. Okay, so in the 2-dimensional array what we did, we have created something like this and internally we have added the rows with same column size. So here also the same way 2 rows are added. In the first row I have only 2 elements. Okay, that means 1, 2, and in the second row I have 4 elements, 3, 4, 5, 6. So something like this. So if you execute this, it is printing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so now we have learned about a single dimensional array and 2-dimensional array and jagged array, right? So let's revise all these topics. So arrays can store multiple values of a single type, right? So if you create the array as integer type, then you can store only integer type of values in that array, right? And the next one is arrays are fixed in length. That means once you create an array, you cannot increase or you cannot decrease the size of that array, right? So next one is arrays can be accessed using index. That means arrays values basically can be accessed using its index. If you want to assign the values or if you want to access the values, you need to use the index only. And the last one is there are 2 types of arrays. Okay, single dimensional and multi-dimensional. In the multi-dimensional again we have 2 types, 2-dimensional and jagged array. Okay, so that is for this video guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like the video, please hit the like button and also share this video with your friends. So if you are facing any issues while writing the program, or if you are having any comments, please let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.